Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the ethnic, religious, and cultural tensions that had long been kept down by Soviet communist ideology began to boil over across its territories. One such region was Georgia, a constituent republic of the Soviet Union with several autonomous regions within it, one of which being South Ossetia. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, national movements sprung up both in Tbilisi, the Georgian capital, and Chisinau Valley, capital of South Ossetia, which would in time coalesce into political parties and other organizations to further their goal of independence. In this initial period, Ossetian and Georgian National Democratic forces were in frequent contact. This was natural, for despite all their differences, both sides understood that they had a common enemy and a common goal. The enemy was the Bolshevik system, and their mutual goal was national liberation from the decaying corpse of the Soviet Empire. After the rise of Zvezda Gamsakhurdia to power in Tbilisi, however, the Georgian national movement adopted a more militant agenda toward integrating and consolidating their power. In 1989, Georgia would try and force South Ossetia to begin using Georgian as the official language of government. This would sow the seeds of division and anger the Ossetian nationalists. On the 10th of November 1989, the Soviet People's Deputies of the South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast voted to upgrade the Autonomous Oblast into an autonomous republic within the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic. The Ossetian deputies called on the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Georgian SSR to accept this decision, but it rejected the proposal, calling it unconstitutional. Then, on the 23rd of November 1989, Gamsakhurdia and allies would plan a mass demonstration in Chisinau Valley. The first secretary of the Central Committee of the Georgian Communist Party would play a prominent role in the event. An estimated 30,000 to 40,000 demonstrators and more than 400 buses and cars set off for Chisinau Valley from Tbilisi. Georgian officials and the Georgian media would present the march as an attempt to hold a peaceful protest. However, among the marchers were several hundred armed men, including some with automatic weapons and many of them members of nationalist paramilitaries. Meanwhile, in November 1990, figures from the nationalist parties came to power in Georgia, which was still at the time the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic, and therefore part of the USSR. While the electoral terms of the South Ossetian Assembly would run out, the Georgian SSR would fail to announce new elections, so when the South Ossetians would go ahead and start a new election, the Georgian government declared them illegal and illegitimate. On the 10th of December 1990, the Georgian Supreme Soviet unanimously decided to abolish the South Ossetian Autonomous Oblast, and essentially downgrade them into just another region like any other. This would not go well. The first serious exchange of fire using automatic weapons took place on the 11th of December 1990. A local policeman was killed during an attempt to stop a car carrying armed men with automatic weapons on one of Chisinau Valley's central streets. These men would later be accused of being a part of Georgia's intelligence service. This incident served as a pretext for the introduction of a state of emergency and curfew in Chisinau Valley, and soldiers were deployed to enforce the curfew as well as to police the region. Then, on the 5th to the 6th of January 1991, the Georgian leadership, without notifying the South Ossetian authorities, brought subdivisions of the police and of the Georgian National Guard into Chisinau Valley, as well as members of various national armed formations. The soldiers formerly deployed at the time would abandon their posts. On their arrival, the Georgian paramilitaries began searches, arrests, murders, lootings, and setting fires to homes and other criminal acts. Fierce fighting would break out, and over the course of 2 weeks, the Georgians would be forced out of Chisinau Valley. They would then begin to take punitive action against the rural areas of the region. The Georgian forces would then blockade South Ossetia for some time, and the Georgian population of the region would be displaced by Ossetian nationalists. By the start of spring 1991, the intensity of fighting had waned, and the summer passed virtually without armed clashes. This same summer, a deadly earthquake would shake up South Ossetia, causing a lot of damage. And beginning in September, the Georgians would resume shelling Chisinau Valley. However, all was to change as an armed coup took place in Georgia, displacing Gamsakhurdia and Edward Shevardnadze coming to power. The coup would be far from peaceful, and many people would lose their lives over the weeks it occurred in. This period would be called the Georgian Civil War, and it is really several conflicts which took place in the country all at the same time rolled into one conflict. It was in spring 1992 that the most intense and bloody final stage of the armed conflict would begin.
Čuvamo
On July 14, 1992, peacekeeping forces composed of Russian, Georgian, and South Ossetian troops were deployed, signaling the end of large-scale fighting. Although occasional clashes continued, the peace agreement largely held until the 2008 war between Russia and Georgia. Throughout the conflict, Russia played a pivotal role, supplying weapons and aid to the South Ossetian forces as well as supporting the Abkhazian separatists. The flow of aid shifted based on the changing political situation in Russia during this turbulent period, and it would be primarily a Russian peacekeeping force that would be present in South Ossetia following peace talks in Sochi in 1992. Although most people are unaware of this conflict in Western nations, in the Caucasus this war was very important, as it served as a template for the future Russian intervention in Chechnya and the Caucasus.